Now we're back in the workspace. We learned how the layers work, and now we're going to see how this stuff around the layer panel, which is right here, works. So right now we're in the layer panel. Next to it we have the channels panel. And channels is just the colors. Remember when we made our document, we chose RGB, and there is RGB, which is the full combined channel. And if I turn that off, we are now seeing only the green and blue. Like we mentioned, RGB is red, green, and blue. So if you want to look for the separate channels, you can do it here. And then next to that, we have something called paths. Now, paths is something we will use when we're using the pen tool or just a specific shape or design. And I'm just going to show what that means. Let me just grab a pen tool and just draw some random shape. Okay, then I'm going to right click and make selection. I'm not going to feather it, just hit OK. And if I right click on this, new guides from shape, this is going to go in my paths. So let me Control D. If something happens, and let me just name this real quick. Let's call it a circle. It's not really a circle, but let's just call it that. Okay, and it just creates one with the name. It's still the same thing. So if I want to create two identical ones, whoops, let me lock the background. Try to move this. Okay. And I want the exact same selection. I would go in my paths and hold the Control on my keyboard and then click on this. I have the exact same selection. And what I can do is maybe paint, go back to my layers, create a new layer, and like maybe paint this layer in. But let me unselect this. Now I have two separate layers, but they're the exact same shape. I'm going to try to move this. Okay. So the exact same shape, but they're two different things. This one's a shape, this one's a layer. And we were able to do that because we saved the path of this shape layer. And again, this is helpful if you're drawing or if you're making selections in different photos or other things. Another thing that we can do, this search bar here just tells you how these are displayed. Right now it's kind, so it's layer, shape, and background. If I change it to name, I can search through here to find my layer, and this is helpful if you have like so many layers and you can't find the layer that you're looking for. Go to maybe effects. I can search through with the effect. So the layer that has, let's say, overlay, I'm going to select this, and it's going to pop up here. So just a filtering thing, and you can search for the colors. Like if I choose something that has green, the green would show up here. This is just for searching through your layers. But if you have like one or two layers, this won't really be helpful. Above this is probably what you've noticed first, is our color panel. This is where you choose your colors. If you have a brush, and let me create a new layer. If you want to use a brush, this is where you would go to choose the color of your choice. Then you can draw using that exact same color. And then you also have, if you don't know where to start and you're looking for a specific color, you would go in swatches. And whatever color you choose here, let me choose like this blue, it's going to be saved here. Whatever I create, going to show up here. So I have these to choose from later on as well. Let me delete, increase the size, delete this guy. And this is just a selection of the swatches that we've made so far. But below here is some color palettes that you can use. There's RGB, which is some basic colors, CMYK. You can see that it's the exact same color, but it's slightly different. And I'm sure you guys were wondering what the difference is. You can see the difference in color, even though they're the same color. We have grayscale, which is just black and white and everything in between. We have pastel colors. We have lights. We have pures. darks, darker, and pale, which is skin tones. So this is how the colors work. But if you want to, let me go back here. If you want to choose a more specific color, like you want to change the brightness, the hue, or if you have a HEX code or a hex code, you can add it here. And you would get hex codes from either the color shade provider, like this would be online and it would be like, this is the hex code, this is the RGB values. You would take those numbers, double click on this color, it will open this panel for you. This is a color picker. It's just picking the colors. I can add, you can see that when I pay attention here, if I select different parts, these values are changing because that is the hex code for the current color, for the new color, sorry. So if you get a hex code from online, all you have to do is add it here. I'm just going to add this random gray. And now I have that gray. So if I hit OK, I now have that gray and I can go ahead and draw with it. Let me undo that, go back to where we were. And other ways that you can choose a specific color. Let me turn this off. Web colors are used for displaying on web. You would turn it on, it would be like this. Let's turn that off. You can choose the hue, which is right here. This is the color of the, like, which color you're going for. So if right now it's 0, so it's at the bottom. If I choose 65, it's going to come up a little. And usually, again, if you find colors online, they'll tell you the values. And let's say the hue would be 14. You can get the hue. Below that is the saturation, which is how intense that color is. Right now it's at 0. This is the horizontal line. If I make it 100, we get this really pure and saturated, I believe, reddish color, red brownish color. Lower that, let's put like 34, we're getting somewhere close to the middle. Then we have the brightness. The brightness is the vertical line. You can see the bottom is black, the top is white. So right now the brightness is at 60, but if I put it at 100, we're going to get a really bright color. Put it at 0, we're going to get black. And then we have the RGB values, which is the red, green, and blue values. You put your value, let's put 12, 9, just some random numbers, 45. And I'm going to change the brightness to like 60%. And because I've added the values, I'm getting this color. But if you don't know the values, it would be easier if you just select it here, or you would import an image. Then you can use the color picker to just select the color that you want. And then we have the lab color space. And lab is a really specific color space. So it's used for maybe automobiles, printing, and stuff that really go for a specific color. If you see like a red iPhone, you would use the LAB values. But you wouldn't really be using this when you're starting out. And then we have the CMYK values, which we talked about is a color mode usually used for printing. But what it stands for is, this is cyan, this is magenta, this is yellow, and this K stands for black. So you can see if I move this, it goes closer to black and just comes in the middle. Change the yellows, it brings the color more to a yellower side. Remove it, it removes all the yellows. The magenta, brings it more to the purple side. Remove it, goes back to the blue. And cyan, it adds more cyan, removes the cyan. So, and if you choose a specific color, like let's say this is our specific color, I could add it to my swatches. If I click it once, name it, let's say phone color, just something natural. And it's going to take a while to add it to my libraries. And then I can just access it whenever I want because I saved it as my own color. Okay, and in the libraries is where you would have colors. Let me hit OK. And there's my color. I have my own custom color. I could share it with others and it's going to be here whenever I need it. So let's close that off. It's also in my swatches panel below this group. So these are their own groups. Let me close them off. Still, there's just so many. Okay, and the color that we just made will show up here. If you right click it, you can make a new swatch group like these ones. I'm going to name it custom colors. Hit OK. And there's custom colors. I'm going to drag it and put it here. And whatever custom color I make, I can just put it here so it's separate from the rest of them. Let me close them. All right. And that's how you work with the colors. And the same thing you have up here, you can also access it down here in the bottom left. If you double click on this, you would get the same panel. And you can see there's two colors. You can switch the two colors. Now it's that red color, now it's white. Then you have this black and white thing, which is just, it'll turn your colors into black and white. And you can switch them here. Another way that you can switch it is using the X on your keyboard, and you can see it's just switching. And if it's not working for you, then that shortcut is not enabled, but it should be by default. Now, another thing to remember about black and white stand for visibility. So we'll get into that in another lesson, but it's good to just know what they stand for. So if you're using mask layers, or if you're making selections, when you're using the color black, you are removing visibility. So if I draw a line here, let me do it here, with black in a mask layer, this selection that I just made is not going to be visible. So it's going to look like this ball has been sliced in half. But if I use the color white on it, I will bring back that layer. So white, just think of it as light is bright, so you can see everything. Black is dark, you cannot see anything. So just remember that, and once we get into the mask layers, it will make more sense. So the colors, you would use it with different tools over here. The most popular one would be the brush tool. You have the bucket tool, you have the pen tool, the shape tool, and the text tool as well. So these are the tools that use colors, and they would all have this similar window. We'll just open them to show it to you. If you go into shapes, you have this top panel, which is where you choose the color for the fill and the stroke. If you go in the text tool, this is where the color will show up. If you double click, it will open up the similar window. And the pen tool is the same thing as the shape tool. You would choose your colors here. The bucket tool, you would choose your colors here. The brush tool is going to be the same thing. And these are the only tools that use color, as well as the mask tool that we'll get into later. So that is how the color space works. We have the properties tool. Which I opened this just talks about the properties for this particular layer. If you go on shape, it's a different thing. For each layer style, it's going to be different. We'll get into that moving forward. And then you have the patterns. This is where the different patterns are going to show up, and you would use patterns in further lessons. We have the gradient thing, which is for gradients. Again, we'll get into that later. The libraries that we saw, these are our own library. And whatever you download from Adobe Stock is also going to show up here, by the way. And you can also purchase additional things. We have the adjustments, add in adjustments, which is the same thing down here. Then we have our history, which is all the things that we've done so far. And you could use it to go back to a certain adjustment. So now we know what this area, let me close that. This area is for. There's a bunch of things here. This is the mask tool. This is the special effects. In the next lesson, we'll go over the other parts. I'll see you guys there.